Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at the new build kit from Burry Green that's designed for the new Baldrick controller. Now if you haven't seen Baldrick yet, he's a brand new little controller from our good friends over at I Liked That, and I'll put a link to the video I did on it up in the top here. So, what does a controller build kit do for us? Why would we want one? Well, it simplifies the task of building an enclosure for your controller so that you can leave it outside with your lights, whatever the weather, whether it be rain, snow, hail, etc. You can rest assured that your controller is going to be quite happily contained in a waterproof enclosure so it can just get on with doing its job. And you don't have to worry about leaks and puddles and all the rest of it. So we've got the build kit here. As you can see, it's in a Bud Industries 32016 enclosure. And you can see already that the enclosure has been professionally cut for the outlets required for the board. We've got the pixel outputs across this side here. We've then got a hole for an Ethernet gland and a PG9 hole for the power to the board. So let's open it up and see what else we get with the box. Here we go. So we've got a little leaflet detailing the components that are in the box. I've got a sticker with it. Underneath the packing here, oh, there we go, get rid of that. We can see that we've got a power cable. We've got low voltage power, so that's mains power, that one. We've got low voltage power. We have an Ethernet cable. A little pack up containing the Ethernet gland and the PG7 pigtail glands. Another little pack up with some screws in it. The ABS controller mount. Now these are designed to fit directly on top of a Meanwell RSP 320 or LRS 350 board. They probably won't fit the generic power supplies, but I wouldn't recommend those anyway. And then in the bottom of the box we've got an acrylic plate that's designed for the power supply to mount on. Now the sharper-eyed of you will have noticed that we're missing a few things to complete the build. And these don't come in the kit, and that is of course Baldrick, the controller itself. You need to buy that separately. You need a power supply. This one is an RSP 32012, and you're going to need your preferred flavour of pigtails. Here in the UK we tend to use these smaller ones that come from our good friends over at Build a Light Show. In the US, I know you tend to use X Connects and Paul Zangs and Ray Woos and all sorts of things. But these are the ones we tend to use over here. And they're the ones I'm going to be using in the build today. So, what tools are we going to need to do this? So, we are going to need some screwdrivers. So I've got just 3 screwdrivers here. I've got a Phillips or crosshead to put the base plate on and also to do up the connectors on the Meanwell. I've got a flathead which is going to do for the power connectors on Baldrick, and then a small flathead that I'm going to be using to do the pixel connections on Baldrick. That's the main things. I've got some wire strippers which I will come into in just a moment. And I've just got a small pair of work scissors just to cut a couple of the cable ties that are on the parts in the box. And that's it. We've got no soldering irons or any of that stuff. You might also want a hot air gun or a hairdryer at a pinch, because there are heat shrink pigtail labels in the box, in the bag here, and you want to shrink them down. If you're going to use those, you're going to want to shrink them down onto your pigtails. But other than that, that's it. So let's crack on. I'm going to put my instructions to one side. First thing we need to do is to take the base plate back out of the box. Now it ships with 2 screws holding it in just for transport. So we'll take those out. There we go. And then we can remove the base plate. Let's get shot of that for a second. Now the base plate is pre-cut with the mounting holes to fit it in the box, and also with 4 mounting holes for the M4 by 8mm machine screws that we're going to use to bolt the power supply into place. So let's get our power supply. Let's just get that open. There we go. Okay. I'm using a 12 volt RSP 320 here. Baldrick of course supports 5 volts right through to 24, so depending on your requirements you might have a different voltage power supply. So I'm just going to tip this upside down. There we go. And it would help if I'd opened a little pack of screws. So here's my little pack up of screws. I've just got 4 M4 by 8s and 4 of the 1/2 inch that are required to secure the base plate down. There we go. So using my M4s, there we go, just line those up, get one corner started, and then I can go for the opposite corner. There she goes. And we can do those all up. There we go, so that's my 4 screws done up, holding them meanwhile onto the back plate. Let's just pull those across there. Now we can fit the back plate back into the box and get that all lined up quite nicely. So again, I'm going to start with opposite corners. There she is. One, 2, and once we've got the opposites in, of course, the other 2 will follow quite nicely. Okay, PSU is in, mounted, ready to go. That's not going anywhere. Next thing is to start fitting the glands onto the front of the case, onto the enclosure. So these are all pre-drilled, ready to go. We've just got to drop our glands into place. So let's get this opened up. There we go. I'm just going to use the lid to store everything for a second. So we have in here the heat shrink labels that are ready to be cut up and put onto our pigtails. We've got 8 PG7 glands, and we have our Ethernet network adapter just to go through. So let's start with, actually I'm going to start with the power cable. This comes pre-terminated. We're in the UK, so it's got a UK plug on it with a suitable fuse. And the other end we've got fork connectors ready to go straight onto the power supply. So let's just unwind that. The PG9 gland is pre-fitted on the cable to save the aggro of trying to get the fork connectors through it. All we do have to do is just take the nut off. We'll just take the nut off the back of that. There we go. And then we can post it through the hole and put the nuts back on. Now at this point I like to put the nuts on backwards with the 3 dots on the back of the nut pointing into the enclosure. That is technically backwards, but it does give you a slightly longer thread to go into the bud box. The bud boxes are a little bit thick, right on the thick edge of what these glands are designed for, so the more thread we can get, the better. Let's just pull that through, there we go. So let's hook her up. Now in the UK we've got brown for live, which I'll do first. Okay. We've got blue for neutral. And green with a yellow stripe for earth. There we go. So they're all in. Now I know in the US you have different colour codes. So if you're building one of these out there, you will need to use a different power cable, but just make sure you get your colours right. There we go. So that's all tied off nice and tight. Now we can move on to installing the PG7s. So again, these come ready to go. We've just got to take the nut off and then reinstall it with the nut on backwards. So that's with the 3 dots facing into the enclosure. There we go, that's in. That's the 8. Oh, that's the 8 PG7s done and the PG9 for power. Now we can drop the Ethernet gland into place. Now it comes with a dust cover, which we can just put on the outside, just to keep the connections clean when we're not using it. There we go, so that's now in place, and we can put the dust cover on. Now if you're making up your own Ethernet cables to go to the box, also comes with this waterproof cover, which you can pass over an Ethernet cable before you make the jack up, and then that would screw on in place of the dust cover to give you a nice watertight seal. Just a standard Ethernet cable will plug in there quite happily though, if you're not making up your own. So that's the glands all done. Let's start now getting ready to put Baldrick into place. And before we put Baldrick on top, I'm just going to get the low voltage power cables hooked up. So these come all ready to go. We've got this end is terminated with the fork connectors, and this end has got ferrules on it to keep it all nice and tidy. Let's just get the break out the little scissors. There we are, and that's done the cable tie. Now I've used we used 10 AWG cable in the build kits. Some people will say that's correct, some people will say it's overkill, but I'd rather err on the side of caution, and we know that Baldrick can pull 30 amps on its inputs, and so I want cable that I know is going to be quite happy at 30 amps. It's not going to start getting warm and causing us problems. There we go, so that's the two grounds. So I connected the two black cables, or ground, or V minus, or 0 volts, or whatever you want to call it, onto the minus V on the power supply, and the red ones are positive. In this case they're going to be 12 volts, and they're connected to the plus V terminals. There we go, they're on, ready to go. Now I think it's time to get Baldrick into place. So we've got the ABS printed mount here that's going to clip right on top of the power supply here. And much like the model kits I was referring to earlier, this thing comes with little pieces that you have to just undo. So we can just roll those in my fingers and it pops out. And that's going to drop through here to give the actual mount for Baldrick to sit on. There's a couple of spares come with the build, so we can just drop those in. There we go, 3. And they just drop in from the rear there, that's it, and push in. A good tight fit, so they're not going to go anywhere. There we are, a little bit of a squeeze on that one, but it's in. And there we are, we can see that we've now got the standoffs ready for Baldrick to sit on. And we can clip this into place. It clips into the little air vents on the sides of the meanwhile. There we are, a nice reassuring click there, and that is locked into place. That's not going to go anywhere unless you want it to. We can get Baldrick now, and he'll mount straight on top of the mount there. There we are, 1, 2, 3, 4. A little bit of a wiggle and a squeeze, clunk, and that's nice and snug in place. That's not going to go anywhere. Super. So let's start getting Baldrick connected. I'm going to connect my power cables now, and the first thing to note is that the two outside connectors are the negatives and the two insides are the positives. So much like a Falcon board, just make sure, double check your polarity when you're hooking it up. Now Baldrick does have power protection or reverse polarity protection, but you don't really want to test it, so let's get that in. There we go, one. These are a little bit tight, or can be. We're on the maximum limits of the size of the cables that these connectors can take. There we go, oh, in. So we'll just get them into place, and then I'm going to screw them down. Now there will be a small amount of the connector sitting outside, but it's low voltage. We're not going to have any issues with power trying to jump out or anything. There we go, that's that side. And I'm just holding on to the cables to keep everything together. We don't want to put too much of a twisting motion against these Phoenix connectors, because there we are, the terminal connectors. But those are in, all nice and snug. Now that just leaves us the pixel connections and of course the Ethernet. Ethernet of course is nice and simple. You get a 25cm cable in the box, and we've just got to plug it in there and plug it in there, and that's Ethernet done, nice and simple. Now for the pixel connections. So I'm just going to take these Phoenix connectors off. They can be a little bit stiff. There we go. And then we're ready to get them hooked up. If I look at my pigtail that I've got here, for tidiness I suppose in transport and whatnot and keeping them clean, the ends of these wires are pre-tinned when we get them. Now we don't want to use these pre-tinned wires into a Phoenix connector because they're not uniformly tinned. They're just dunked into tin, pulled out, and they're going to have little irregularities in the tinning, which means we might not get a good connection onto the Phoenix plug. And if we don't get a good connection and we start pulling our up to 7.5 amps through each one, then it might get hot and then you're going to cause problems. So best thing to do is to get your trusty wire strippers, just trim the pre-tinned ends off and then strip about 5mm or half an inch, not half an inch, quarter of an inch. Strip about quarter of an inch, 5mm off the end, and then we can just give them a spin with the fingers, and these will make a far better connection. Now if you're asking then why do we went bare copper here and I've got ferrules on the main connectors, very similar reason. It keeps the connectors all nice and neat in transit, but the ferrules are designed to deform when you lean on them on the screws. So once you get on there and you lean on them, the ferrules will deform to give you a good connection. The soldered or tinned ends will not deform, so that's why you want to do this. So I'm going to start down the bottom here, on the bottom left hand corner in this case. Take the PG7 nut off and stick it on the cable, and then there's a rubber grommet in here. You want to pull that out as well and stick that on the cable, and then you can just pull it down a little bit with your fingers, and we're ready then to poke this wire through the PG7. There it goes, and up, ready to connect to our Phoenix connector. There we go, that's in there. I can stick the end back on. Now, important to note the order of the wires. For these Builder Light Show wires, red is positive. Let's try and get that clearer. We've got red is positive, we have yellow is data, and we have black as negative. And it's important to just double check on Baldrick which way we're doing it. And this wants ground, data, and then power. So black on the left in my case, red on the right, and data in the middle. So I'm just going to fold these ends over just slightly so we get a nice good connection, and then I can start putting my wires into place. There we go, and we want to get the wires right inside. I don't want any copper strands sticking out the top, ready to short out against the next connector, and so on. Now I think this is the time where I go for a bit of super speedy zoom, and we whiz through the next 5 minutes in seconds. And there we are. We have our fully completed build kit done and ready to go. We have our 8 pixel ports, our Ethernet, and our power. We're ready now to hook it up and give it a quick test. So I've got my power cable ready to go. I have an Ethernet cable just lurking in the sidelines here, so I'm just going to plug that in. There we are, that's my network connected. Now I can hook up some power. And the power supply has woken up, and I can see that there's activity on the Ethernet jack of Baldrick there. Hopefully, yeah, you can just about make that out. Lovely. So if I look at my PC now, I can navigate to baldrickboard.local, and I can see that it's up, it's ready. So let's get some pixels configured. I've got port 8 already configured for some pixels. So let's bring some pixels into the show. And I'm going to hook them up onto port 8 here. There we are. So they're ready to go. Let's go for some display testing, and we'll make it nice and bright so you can see it. And there we go, there's our red, our blue and our green. And there's a lovely colour wash. So that's it. That's completed the very quick build of the Burry Green Baldrick enclosure. That's all ready to go now, so that we can shut it all up. There we go. Oh. That can now be put out in the elements, and the pixels are busy doing their thing. So as always, I hope you found that useful. Please do like, share and subscribe, and we will of course see you on the next one. Take care. Bye for now.